With Bible literacy in decline, my next guests are passionate about changing that by making the good book more accessible to a younger generation. So they created this, the Tiny Truths Illustrated Bible, the incredible story of who God is, who you are, and who you were made to be. Welcome, Tim and Joanna.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, okay, there are tons of kids' Bibles out there. I know in my household, we have quite a few. Why decide to do this?
Well, I think we saw a lot of popular Bibles that felt a little bit older than the one this one has been written for. We saw board books, and then we saw something like the Sally Lloyd Jones Jesus Storybook Bible, and we saw a lot of 3, 4, 5-year-olds being read those stories, which are a little bit old. We wanted to make something that was really fun, really cartoony, really accessible to children, and we really wanted to tell the Bible as a story, as one single story, end to end, which we hadn't often seen. And we also wanted to talk about identity. We really wanted to make it about who God is, who you are, what defines you, and really put an emphasis, I guess, on that.
Why was that identity so important that you hone in on that, Joanna?
I think we had this realization, or I did, it was kind of roundabout when I had my first child, that we're always telling ourselves stories about who we are and what the world is about and what we're made for. And we're always telling our kids those stories, and we want desperately to tell them the right story about who they are. And this, for us, is obviously the biggest and the best story. And we wanted to write a Bible and to create a Bible that would really convey that in a super simple way, like the joy of the fact that we're made out of love, and we're made for love, we're made into relationship, we're made for relationship, and just those simple things in a really easy way that kids can understand.
That's interesting, because I think both of you have a story of, as you're writing this, finding out what your identity was. Mm-hmm. Tim, do you want to go first and share?
Yeah, so I was raised with a relatively transactional understanding of who God is and what a relationship with Him looked like. I do this, He does that. I do this, He does that, and if you do this, He does that. And I went to Bible college. I married the right kind of person. I went to church. I was in leadership. I went to a small group every Tuesday night. And then things didn't work out. The bottom dropped right out. I lost a relationship, I lost my church in the process, our small group exploded, as these things often do. And in the process, I wouldn't say that I lost my belief in God, but in some ways I lost my faith. I felt abandoned because all these things that I had been told would be true if I did these things proved to not be true. And then I had to really reevaluate and really try to figure out, well, what can we know? What can we know with certainty? And not going to the church I was going to, I joined a community in the Parkdale neighborhood of Toronto, which has a disproportionate amount of marginalized people dealing with mental health and addiction issues. And I heard, I was looking at people whose circumstances were not going to get better. If we're realistic, miracles can happen, of course, and they do. But for the most part, these were people in circumstances that weren't going to change. But I saw how they talked about God. I understood how they understood Him. So now I'm trying to wrestle with what I've been told my whole life and what I have actually experienced in my life.
Right.
And it was a real problem. And so when we started to work on this, I remember thinking, what an amazing privilege and opportunity to be able to devote this time to go right back to the basics, to go right from the beginning to the end, and to really work out what it means. And not only that, but to simplify the message so that a child can understand it. And then what's crazy is what I found in the process is that when you simplify it to what a child can understand, you don't really need to go much further than that.
It's not that complicated.
It really is that simple. And so what was amazing was what I had made very, very complicated in my own mind became very clear and very simple. As soon as I just went through the whole thing and saw what the story really is and what we really can, what I believe, we can really be certain of, which is less than I thought, but it's way more than I even need, if that makes sense.
How about for you, Joanna? I know that there was also just understanding your identity a little bit more as you delved into this.
Yeah, definitely. For me, it was slightly different, and had a lot to do with the fact that I had a child just as we started working on this, and all of a sudden Tim and I are both quite academic creatures. We spend a lot of time in our heads. I've always loved books. We both have. We read a lot. We read everything we can get our hands on. And I grew up wanting to be certain about everything. I wanted everything to be black and white. I wanted to be sure of everything. And I enjoyed wrestling, you know, with theological and philosophical questions. And then I had kids, and I realized that I needed to convey this story, this faith, this joy that I have. And they weren't interested in the academics. They weren't interested in the theological arguments. And it needed to be simple. So I found myself, through the process of, the creative process of going through the stories, working out how we write this thing, having things kind of really pared down, and coming back, for me, I think stepping out of some of the complexities and into the joy of the simplicity. So that was my path.
Even the selection on, you know, the stories that you choose to tell from the Old Testament and New Testament is interesting in here. And also, you know, the diversity of skin color in this book obviously was intentional. Tell me about that.
Very much so. I mean, really, we just set out to make something that felt true to what we know of where these stories happened and what Jesus probably looked like in terms of skin color and diversity. And we just wanted to be accurate.
Yeah.
So we did spend a lot of time thinking about our color palettes, and we also grew up reading Bibles with Jesus with, you know, blonde hair and blue eyes, and we wanted to create something for kids that just felt more realistic and accurate.
Why is it important to be able to present this to the next generation, to invest in kids and say, you are, you know, beautifully and wonderfully made by God in this way?
I just feel like what could be more important? The way that we end it is with Revelation and this section which we call In the Meantime, where we talk about the fact that we have the privilege to participate in the restoration of creation, the healing of God's world, and that's our role, and it's the role of the next generation. And I just can't think of anything more exciting than saying to kids, you get to do this. This is what you're made for. You get to take part. You get to help make things a little bit better with God's help.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, so do you have a website where people can find out more about Tiny Truths? Tim?
Yeah, if you go to tinytruthsbible.com, it's all there.
All right.
And
Awesome.
with resources too, coloring pages, crafts, yeah.
The whole thing. Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.